applause for Sai. There we go. All right.
It's very rare the IT guy gets applauded, but I'll take it. Just go ahead and file a ticket.
Cool. All right. You want to start with a little intro to yourself?
Yeah. So, hey, everyone, nice to meet you. My name is Sai. I'm head of business systems at a company called Anduril. If you haven't heard of them, it's a defense technology startup. We make robot everything, robot fighter jet, robot submarine, and kind of everything in between, as well as the software to command and control that called Lattice. Been there for about 1 year and 3/4-ish. Before that was at a SF company called Flexport, and before that, Amazon, before that, in the Army. And yeah, like somehow weirdly fell into this position, not a classical IT guy. I came up through software product management once I joined the civilian workforce. And I don't know why I have this job, but they haven't fired me yet, so.
There you go. Awesome. So tell us a bit about what is kind of the scope of what is business systems and what does that entail?
Yeah, it's our internal operating system. It's the internal tech stack. So I report up to our CIO, who obviously has other, the IT service desk and all the security engineering and many other things. But when you talk about how people do their daily work, those daily processes and workflows, whether it's sales using Salesforce, whether it's our EE or MEcEng in their respective CAD tools, whether it's supply chain and procurement in the ERP, like all those giant enterprise platforms, whether we buy them or whether we build them ourselves, that's my team.
Awesome. And how do you see yourself as, how does leadership view, your responsibility and kind of the overall value proposition of what you do?
Yeah, I've been blessed by having some really excellent leadership who acknowledge the necessity and importance of business systems and this internal operating system. Too often, the IT department is a cost center. And what do you do with cost centers? You keep them as small as possible. Whereas we are leaning heavily into our internal tech stack. It is going to be a part of our competitive advantage, up there, a peer to, the robot fighter jet and the robot submarine. So we're investing heavily in this space. We're developing a lot of the internal tools ourselves when we find solutions on the market are just not up to snuff, which we'll talk about later, because most in the aerospace and defense industry are not okay. And so just the backing of leadership to kind of really spread our wings, set a vision, and figure out how to be world-class.
Good answer. How do you define what's world-class in these systems? How do you what are your KPIs as you're kind of looking to build these or adopt?
You have to work back from your company's mission. What does it take to make your company accomplish their mission, accomplish that end state? And then what would we have to be world-class at in order for that vision and that end state to become true? So Anduril, we manufacture high quantity attritable autonomous vehicles, right? So drones that you send out on a mission and you expect a lot of them to not come back, and that's okay. It is a radical departure from the way most defense manufacturers think about things, and that's just the changing nature of warfare. And so we know we have to be world-class at production. We have to be cranking out these things in massive, massive numbers compared to the more exquisite and manned systems that you see in traditional defense manufacturing, like an Abrams or a F-22 or something like that, right? You'll see one of those come down the line per month. We need 100 per day with some of the vehicles that we're going to be making. So we have to be world-class manufacturing. Are the MESs out there going to allow us to be world-class? Not just sufficient, not just good, but world-class. And you go through a lot of diligence and you kind of, you do the RFP process and you really kick the tires and you really question yourself from first principles thinking. And then you make a decision of, yes, if we have to be world-class in this domain and there's nothing on the market that will actually allow us to be world-class, then we're going to roll it ourselves. We're going to build our own and we're going to own it at the code level so we can own the interfaces, we can own the workflows, we can own the logic, we can own security and so forth. And if we don't need to be world-class, or if there is an on-the-market solution or on-the-shelf solution that allows us to be world-class, maybe we go with something that we can buy.
Awesome. We talked earlier this morning about, the importance of speed to market, kind of like leveraging the resources that you have and making them as efficient as possible. Do you feel that's something that resonates? You've worked in the defense industry, you've worked outside of the defense industry. Is that something that's extra important in defense, or it's just that should apply to any company that's building product?
I mean, I think it applies to any company, especially startups, right? You have to fight the incumbents, you have to find space, but oh my God, is it so true in the defense space? Folks, if you're not watching what's going on in other parts of the world, right? If you're not watching the archaic nature in which our country, procures weapon systems to fight the next war, we, like the company at Anduril and Epirus and like all these other defense tech startups, we have a dual mission. It's not just to be commercially successful, but it is to fundamentally defend the Western way of life. And we have to move faster. We have to move so much faster. I start to shake when I think about this because of like the velocity that we need to accomplish both on the software side and on the hardware side, and all the things that are getting in our way, whether it's supplier management and quality, whether it's the clunky NPI process that we have, whether it's the fact that we just hired this year 1,000 people, next year we're going to hire another 1,000 people, and I need to get them onboarded to these enterprise platforms that I run. I need to like standardize processes so we don't have 18 different ways to file an incident report ticket. Like these things slow us down, and I cannot afford that. We cannot afford that.
Yeah. How often, so I think your leadership understands this importance, you understand this importance. Is this a conversation that you're taking also up to your customers, the Department of Defense, or your customer base at the end of the day? Do they understand why you are investing so heavily in business systems and taking the time to do that?
It typically doesn't get to the customer base. Okay. There's been a few that have shown interest in, if you've heard buzzwords like digital threads, digital engineering, right? There's a couple that have like wanted to peek under the hood, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so we show them, our system architecture and our diagrams, and the fact that, another tool that we've decided to build ourselves is our own iPass. So rather than your MuleSoft or Boomi or whatever, we built our own connectors because there's so many tools to integrate. So many systems have to be integrated that we said, you know what? We have to be world-class at this. We're going to build it ourselves. And so there are some interested, customers in some of these different branches, program offices that are keen to learn that stuff. And we're happy to kind of open the kimono and show them, because that's just another way to earn trust.
So you're kind of on this journey of interoperability we talked about, and kind of connecting all these dots. Where's like the next level for you that you want to get to as you're building these systems out? What are some of the goals you're looking for long term? Yeah,
my magnum opus is what we're calling Arsenal OS, or Arsenal Operating System. Maybe it was like 2 months ago or so, Anduril announced this rebuilding the Arsenal is in conjunction with our $1.5 billion raise. We're basically building our own gigafactories somewhere in the US, right? So a 5 million square foot manufacturing facility that has to be extremely reconfigurable, because 1 month we might be popping out, a bunch of robot submarines based on a customer order, and then the next month we have to do loitering munitions, and then the next month we have to do like ISR platforms, right? And so we've kind of envisioned this giant manufacturing and production facility. They need an OS for that, right? They need MRO, MES, PLM, like production planning, workforce staffing and planning, like punch in, punch out cards, timekeeping tools, like the list goes on. And so we're kind of framing all of this. I've got basically a 2D drawing that's like a big box, and I'm like, it's Arsenal OS, and I don't know what's going to go in there, but it's going to be awesome. So that's kind of like, that's the big thing for me.
And as you're kind of, maybe to make it a little bit more tangible for the crowd here, and to some extent, we talked a lot about how, the importance of some systems for engineers to be able to access their, the data and make that as a tool for them to accelerate. Yeah. Maybe you could speak to some of the wins from some of the systems that you've developed in-house of connecting making those conduits a little bit faster.
Yeah. I think the cleanest or simplest example is also one of the most boring, but it's a useful example nevertheless, is timekeeping. Like not something you think about, right? Like it's like just a necessary evil. Maybe many of you have never even had to deal with that, but certainly in the defense industry, like you got to do your timekeeping. Like what projects did you work on this week and how many hours? And especially if you're doing contracted research and development, CRAD, meaning the government is paying you to develop, They get to know down to the 30-minute increment, what did you work on this week, and like how much of that work was paid for by me, and I should be able to, I get to audit that at any moment in time. So we know we had to do this once we won some contracts. We went out, we looked at the market, and my God, is it a bunch of rent-seeking software vendors who haven't refreshed their UI since Windows 95 came out. It was just infuriating. And because we're in the A&D space, like you just go ahead and wipe out 80% of the SaaS solutions. It's just not available to us because of data governance, because your vendor's customer support team might be overseas, because it can't hold CUI data. It can't be hosted in GovCloud, whether it's AWS or Azure. There's a bunch of reasons that we just simply don't get to use most software. So you had a couple like archaic tools out there, but they got the stamp of approval. And so those companies that are risk adverse just buy that. You just keep chugging along and you apologize to your user base to say, sorry, yeah, it sucks, but that's what you got to do if you work here. We said to hell with that. We're building our own thing. We built a timekeeping tool we call Jolt. Extremely intuitive. It's a beautiful piece of software. It's drag and drop. And now I've got over 1,000 employees using it every week. And if they, the typical timekeeping in the previous tool we had took you 3 minutes. In Jolt, it takes you about 30 seconds. Multiply that by 1,000 people per week. That compounds very, very quickly in terms of operational efficiency that we get back in our time. And again, it's timekeeping. I realize that's not something we have to be world-class at. We have to be sufficient. We have to be compliant at it. But you take that kind of principled thinking. That's why we built our own MES. That's why we built our own iPaaS. That's why we're building our own MRO. And the list will continue to expand over time.
Awesome, thanks. Which other, I guess, you worked at a couple other companies besides Anduril. When you look kind of, I don't know if you kind of for inspiration or for kind of a guiding star, are there other companies that you've seen have success in kind of building these interoperable systems?
Yeah. There's probably some people, like SpaceX is a big one that we look at, in large part because a large percentage of my company's engineers come from the SpaceX and Tesla world, and they're kind of famous for warp drive, basically building their own ERP/PLM/everything tool. Though I do hear that recently they've kind of started to move back to commercial off-the-shelf solutions in some parts. I've actually been inspired a fair bit by Meta. They've rolled their own PLM for data centers and a few other places. Kuiper under Amazon, another example of kind of, and then Blue Origin, another example of companies that are tending to kind of roll their own software more and more just based on dissatisfaction with like the bulky enterprise platforms that they find out there.
I think one thing, having worked at several companies and been able to work with several companies, these are often these systems are kind of foregone conclusions. Someone made a decision as part of a bid process 10 years ago. There's a ton of inertia behind them, and you're kind of stuck with it.
Yep.
What advice would you give to we'll talk about legacy companies for now, and then we'll talk about startups later. But what advice would you give to legacy companies that how do you make this not a fixed variable and something that you can try to...
I don't know if I'm the right guy for this advice, right? I came from software product management. They hired me to be like a principal software product manager for all of our internally built software, and then the next thing you know, I'm in charge of business systems. I'm able to keep this job because I think of the vision I set and just the general kind of mission alignment and aggressiveness I bring, but man, I would not get a job at most of the legacy defense manufacturers. They wouldn't hire me at all. So it's tough. I understand the enormity of the opportunity cost that they have to weigh when you're looking at something like upgrading your ERP because you're running a 25-year-old version of SAP that you pay SAP to maintain because like you're the only client left even running that version. I genuinely don't know what to do to recommend besides like leave your job and go work at a startup where you have more of a blank slate like me. But I'm not good at career advice, so.
How would you mentioned you wouldn't get hired at some of those companies. How do you distinguish the profile of the folks, yourself and the folks working for you versus those?
Sure. Think about your IT department at your company. Are they risk on or are they risk off? Like, what's the culture Like, what did the executive team allow? Do they see your CIO as like someone who brings innovation, who sets the pace for your company, who thinks of your internal tech stack as a part of your competitive advantage, who's willing to like take bets on like working with a startup like Instrumental, or is it always about just kind of keeping costs low, right? Minimizing your headcount expansion and things of that nature. I'm a very risk-on person. Like I swing for the fences, and I'm attracted to companies that do the same. So like you just kind of have to evaluate. It comes down to a cultural thing.
Awesome. How do you balance, in a startup environment, especially when potentially you're burning through cash, or you just have the mission that you have to get out the door as quickly as possible? How do you balance the need to move quickly with also taking the time to get some of these solutions in place? And creating space for yourself to do that? Yeah.
I think there's a lot of inspiration from software development best practices here, right? And that's what I've tried to bring to my organization, where I inherited quite a few of the kind of more traditional IT folks of how do you stay agile, how do you define, proof of concept, and then MVP, and then various phases and getting out to like general availability in the same way you would with a B2C software product. Those principles largely apply. Obviously, the timelines can be lengthier and the security requirements and all that are additional factors, but like you stay lean, you stay hungry, and you stay aggressive.
How would you say the reaction to, you've got your leadership, maybe they're reacting one way, and your user base, there's kind of your engineers and your operators. How would you say the reception's been? Are people looking for these new tools? Are they asking for them, or is this a push?
Overwhelmingly, the response across the stakeholder base of all my tools are, we want something built for ourselves because we don't like what has been bought. And so the part of my department that is internal software development, meaning my PMs, my SWEs, my designers, they are overwhelmed with systems engineers and the various hardware engineers and deployment operations, all asking like, can you build this for me? Because I love what you built for manufacturing. Like you built the MES for them. I love the workflows. I love the intuitiveness of the interface. And then it's the teams that are kind of stuck with the off-the-shelf things that have not seen significant investments in the intuitiveness, the UI, the UX. That's typically where the more complaints are. One of the things I credit my time at Amazon instilling in me is just this customer obsession. It's entirely too easy when you've come into IT departments and you've been raised in IT departments to be like very compliance and finance centric. And you forget about the end user and you do not have this concept of you have to earn their business because it's too easy in IT. You're like, hey, this is your ERP. What are you going to do? Find another ERP? Yeah, good luck, right? You have to fight violently against that mindset and like purge it if you find it in your IT departments of winning your customer every single day. Like, how do you get them less clicks? How do you get it more automated? How do you get it simpler? Just chipping away. How do you have telemetry in these applications so you understand the time on page and the load and things that you would see in a B2C or a B2B software development process that you just typically don't see in IT?
All right, we're running out of time here, but I think we'll end on maybe some doom and gloom. What are some of the issues in your purview that keep you up at night? What are you worried about? That you're trying to solve. That you're like, man, I don't know if I can get there, but you're working on it.
Spies, but besides that, a little bit more applicable for everyone else. I'm going through an ERP implementation right now, moving from NetSuite to Oracle, and so that's a quick way to lose my job. So we'll see if I'm here a year from now. Either I did a good job briefing and I'm still gainfully employed. So that's probably the big one.
Awesome. And then what advice? We talked about some of the legacy companies, but in a startup, what advice would you give to other startup folks that maybe are in your position or should create a position like yours?
Yeah, it's too often it's kind of thought about after the fact, right? Like you have to think about your internal tools, your internal workflows, and how to invest early on your employee productivity and optimization.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks. I think
we're over. But thank everyone. I'm hiring.